This is Jonathan Ferguson, the Keeper of Firearms and Artillery at the Royal Armouries Museum in the UK, which houses a collection of thousands of iconic weapons from throughout history. And on today's episode, Jonathan's taking a look at more of the iconic weapons from Call of Duty Modern Warfare Remastered.
Wow. Well, quite a lot of collectors around the world might quite like a 5.56mm Sturmgewehr, but shiny brass NATO cases coming out of a Second World War boutique caliber rifle is a bit jarring.
Make sure to subscribe so you can check out all the new videos including Jonathan, and if there are any other games, guns, or mechanics you guys want to see Jonathan break down, let us know in the comment section below. Right, let's take a look at some more of the guns of Call of Duty 4 Modern Warfare.
M60, not the M60E4, which is what I think COD always called it. The E4 is actually very similar, but what's modelled in the game is an E3. By default, it doesn't have the foregrip, hence this one's called the M60E4, actually E3. But by default, it absolutely did have this forward pistol grip, which is somewhat unusual, certainly for the 1985-6 when this revised form of M60 machine gun came in, because it's sort of, well, it's only really useful for assaulting, clearing houses, CQB, that kind of thing. It's not the traditional purpose of a machine gun, of course. That is facilitated by the bipod, which is different on the E3, as well as a different gas system, slightly different gas system anyway. Different furniture, so a different pattern of buttstock, but it's still reminiscent of the original Vietnam era M60. And this, I don't know, it's actually quite robust, but it has a look and feel of being a bit cheap and plasticky. No offense to Seiko Defense, who redesigned the M60 to, I believe, to try to improve reliability, because certainly by then the M60 was becoming a bit unreliable, and also to make it more user-friendly. They managed to shave a fair bit of weight off this thing. It's still hefty, but it's lighter than the original M60. So I can't remember how good it was in the original game, but they've done a good job of modelling the E3/E4. We've got belts. Well, we'll just about see the belt moving. We've got links flying out the side. We've got the carrying handle flapping away there. Now, in reality, that does actually flap about a fair bit, so that's probably reasonable. Yeah, what can I say? It's the iconic M60, but it's not the iconic variant. It's safe to say that would be the classic Vietnam version with the big ribbed foregrip. Now, I can't recall how it is that we're coming across the M60 in the campaign. Given the time frame of the game, it shouldn't be. It's not standard US military issue, certainly, but it is it was the last general service variant of the M60 for infantry. M60s are still around on vehicle mounts, but by this point, the replacement for this was what we call the GPMG, the M240. Onto the G3. Now the one I happen to pull off the wall here, so very nicely armourer sectioned example. Just about seeing there the infamous rollers that delay the opening of the bolt on firing. Now, I haven't just grabbed this to randomly show you a G3. In the game, cocking handle sticks out at about that angle and stays there. In reality, it always stays closed. Nicely out of the way, much harder to snag on something and cause a problem. Just to prove me wrong, it has stuck open there, but when you fire it, it would flick shut again. Quite a strong spring in there as well, so hey, maybe this one has a broken spring, but then if it did, this would be flapping around like a mad thing, and it doesn't. So that's a minor mistake, I think. In terms of sort of feel, the G3 is still semi-auto only, clearly. In a game where you cannot change your rate of fire, especially, that's the right choice, I think. Although, it could have been an interesting challenge to make people trigger control it into either single shots or short bursts, because it would be uncontrollable, aiming at the sky after a burst of fire, both in real life and the way it's modelled here, because we've got a decent amount of recoil, quite a punchy sound. It feels like and I don't like this term, but battle rifle.
Our UAV is online.
We've got another instance of not quite right iron sights, which is probably a deliberate decision to give you a slightly clear field of view at distance. But that deep notch at the base of that 100-meter setting on this drum, that's where you ought to be aiming. You're supposed to bring the front sight right down into that little V there. Here, we're floating level with that. Yeah, you could use it that way. I just don't know why you would, because you're losing the precision of using the sight.
Move up. Beautiful. Coast is clear.
The USP, I happen to have grabbed the only USP 45 that we have, which is a compact version. This is the version of the game is the full size, and we do not have a suppressed version. It's one of a range of models, a family of weapons, if you will, in the HK range. The 45 being a little bit chunkier than its 9mm stablemates. I do think, and the only thing that really sticks out for me with this is how very quiet it is. I think if anything, they could have made the MP5 SD a bit quieter, because in real life that's quieter than any suppressed pistol. I think that, well, almost any suppressed pistol. Fair to say quieter than this one, due to the sheer volume of the suppressor. It's the holes in the barrel that are drilled on the MP5 to better expand and cool the gases and reduce the pressure differential. All of that. Check out our loadout episode on suppressors for a refresher on that. Point is, this one is your classic action movie / Call of Duty game. Very, very quiet suppressed pistol. Too quiet, but hey, it does fit the feel of skulking around with something that can very silently kill.
We're spotted. Take cover.
The only other thing I'd say about this is it does have that visible slide issue that I've commented on before, where you might see a slide moving in YouTube videos. That's a frame rate thing. If you see a pistol fired, you cannot really, and certainly not if you're not looking for it, see the slide moving through space. You'll see a blur, you'll see that it's moving, but you won't see it. It's moving too slowly, essentially. But this is a very common issue. And I think it's partly down to oversight in modeling guns, but also people expect to be able to see parts moving on guns. So we might be stuck with it. But a lot of the more recent games, including the more recent COD games actually, do get that right. Okay, I have freeze framed here and some really nice attention to detail on the ejected cases on this AK. They are, well, first of all, we've got the primers dented, which, you know, as we know, we like on this series. Well modeled. They're not cutting any corners there. Maybe not super high poly like a truly modern game would do. But what I'm impressed by is the coloration. So that grayish color, depending on the lighting, looks about right for one of the various steel cased types of ammunition that AKs commonly are used with. So that would be a steel case rather than brass, and then lacquered with it's usually a dark gray. But this looks like what you'd expect to see for fairly standard Soviet surplus ammunition. The gun itself is looking good. Would expect COD to get AKs right by this point. What they technically haven't got right is the name, but that depends on the level of detail that you're operating at. AK-47 is the world over what any Kalashnikov rifle is called. This is an AKM, however. And if you want to get uber technical, I think we've said this before, but AK-47 is the designation for one of the prototypes of the AK. There is limited documentation that was introduced with the AK when it was first launched into service that does say AK-47, but it was never its official in-service name. The best kind of correct, as we know, technically correct, AK-47 is not right, but everyone calls it that. Something I noticed there that's a bit curious, and I can't recall if this was the case in the original version of the game or not, but just a random AK that I've just grabbed. This one happens to be sectioned, which is quite cool. It is an AKM pattern receiver. It's not the same model of gun as the game, but reason for showing you that rear sight notch is very small. Small notches or apertures are how you have any level of accuracy with iron sights, basically, with the exception of larger round apertures where your eye naturally will center the front sight in it. Those can be effective out to quite some distance, but for a notch, let's say that at least, it does have to be either a deep V so that you can use the bottom of the V for a bit of precision aiming, or as on the real AKM, a very narrow little notch there. Not a great big open channel like it is on this rear sight. I don't know why it looks like that. Maybe they found the sight picture a bit too claustrophobic to use effectively in the game. Maybe they just made a mistake. But otherwise, the model looks pretty good. We've got a GP25, as it says there, fitted. Grenade launcher, that's the standard, or was the standard Soviet era underbarrel grenade launcher. Muzzle loaded, so it's being loaded correctly there. And loosely, that's how it works in terms of its effect. The original Modern Warfare was one of the first games to vaguely correctly depict grenades, whether rifle grenades or hand grenades. They're not a Hollywood fireball. They are a puff of smoke, flying shrapnel, and a blast wave. And largely down to things like Saving Private Ryan, especially Black Hawk Down, which is probably the major influence on Modern Warfare, the original. It feels more, or at least feels like we're watching a war movie and not something completely gamified. So we get gamified gameplay, but a sort of verisimilitude, to use a highfalutin word, for something that feels real. It's not realistic, but it feels real.
Our UAV is online.
Well, as an arachnologist who's a bit too into his job might say, that's a very nice looking Skorpion. Sorry, that was appalling. Now, the version I grabbed today is actually a suppressed version. I'm not sure that that's possible to use in this game or not, but I thought it was interesting. We've looked at Skorpion before. I don't think we've looked at the suppressed version. Otherwise, though, this is identical to the one that's modeled in the game. And yeah, they've done a great job of updating the Skorpion. Major drawback of the suppressor is you can't fold the stock. But we can see there's some minor differences in how bits are shaped in detail on this, but build standards changing over time. It's possible you could find a Skorpion that looks absolutely identical to that. And the receivers, the grip, they look to be well realized. We get the correct magazine body shape when the magazine is pulled out of the gun, but what we're not seeing is the hold open device activating device here. And I didn't get a good sense of the lug on the back either. It looked a bit like there was a bit missing from the mag. So I think that might be a little under-modelled, if I'm being harsh. Rate of fire seems a bit slow. Put a fair few rounds through these. They're pretty fast. But I could be misremembering, but I think it is a bit slow.
Check your fire. We gotta take this guy alive.
Pause there. I think the thing that comes across the most is how controllable this thing is. If the rate of fire is wrong, it's not that wrong. It's only going to be a slight difference. What's most important is you've got relatively low damage, relatively high rate of fire, and very, very controllable. Even with that stock folded, the way the character's gripping it like that, it's slightly an awkward thing to hold. There isn't I mean, this at least has the suppressor, where this would get very hot very quickly. There isn't a natural place to hold this. You have to kind of try to hold as much of the lower receiver as you can, and you inevitably end up interfering with the magazine, which isn't great. We don't like to do that. That said, the magazine does lock in pretty well, and it doesn't seem to affect functioning. Because what you need to avoid are these cocking lugs, these sort of ears that come flying back and forth. Because if they hit your thumb, well, firstly, that could hurt, depending on where your thumb is. And secondly, it's going to stop your gun from working. So you absolutely must keep clear of that. It almost feels like you want to hold it one-handed. And in fact, if you were going to do the Hollywood thing of firing an automatic weapon one-handed, this would be the thing to do it with, because it's relatively controllable. You'd still miss. Wow. Well, quite a lot of collectors around the world might quite like a 5.56mm Sturmgewehr, but I'm being a little bit snide here. The ejected cases from this MP44 is what it's called. I don't know if the receiver is marked MP44. Appear to be 5.56mm brass cases. They're certainly not 7.92 by 33, which is remarkably short, even compared to the 7.62 by 39. It's all in the case length: 33mm, 39mm, 45mm, which is what this appears to be. I don't know why they didn't just use the 7.62 by 39 cases for the AK. The vast majority of 7.92 ammo in existence has a similar grey finish to that AK ammo anyway, so that would have been a better fit. I might not even have noticed. But shiny brass NATO cases coming out of a Second World War boutique caliber rifle is a bit jarring, which is a shame because otherwise I do not have to reach for my emotional support because this is mercifully free. In fact, for once, this gun is more faithful to history than the real one, because with a couple of exceptions from what I think are probably troop trials, this optical sight that's fitted to this example was not actually used en masse.
Enemy UAV is airborne.
But this is a good rendition of the SGG or MP44. Would it be in this environment? Well, some have shown up, notably in Syria. They did manage to make their way to the Middle East in some notable numbers, i.e. a handful here and there, crate here and there. The problem is the ammunition. The problem for the people who want to use them now, and a handful of places where they've shown up is, well, if you can get ammunition from Afghanistan or the tribal areas of Pakistan, they actually make 7.92 by 33. Amazingly, I think they call it 30 bore, which is weird, but nonetheless, that was a standard caliber up there. So you can get the ammo. This is just as good in broad strokes as an AK. And hey, the Germans kind of did it first. We have the Fedorov, we have other automatic rifles that you can argue about the first assault rifle, but in terms of the concept and the doctrine and the reduced power, reduced case length cartridge, it was this puppy. So somehow its presence in Call of Duty Modern Warfare as the first of its breed doesn't feel entirely inappropriate. And as noted, they have appeared in the Middle East. Now, although the very convoluted stamped design of this gun is really nicely represented here, even the bolt carrier group through the ejection port is really nicely modeled. For whatever reason, they don't seem to have put the marking, in this case MP44, and in this case it should be MP44 as well. They don't seem to have put that stamped marking in there, which is a little curious. The rear sight aperture, as with a lot of the other guns in this game, is a bit wacky. It's far too wide. It seems to be designed to the width of the apparent width to the shooter of the front sight protector, which is kind of strange. It's meant to be the width of the front sight post. Right, so on further investigation, we have the magazine. That's a really very good model of the bit of the magazine you don't normally see. I remember in early shooters, you take the mag off and it would be basically just that in some cases, or at the very least there'd be no feed lips, there'd be no visible rounds. This has visible rounds, and sure enough, they do look like 5.56 rounds, but kind of proportionately squished to fit the magazine. But then when they eject, they certainly do look like full-size 5.56. There's probably perspective going on here. Anyway, the bullets on there are really short and truncated, again, to make that fudged round fit the magazine. This would have been basically perfect if they could have just got the rounds correct. We really appreciate you watching these videos. We are a museum, so if you'd like to support us, you can go to our website and find out how to do that, whether that's visiting or dropping us a bit of money. We also have quite a few social media outlets, and we have our own YouTube channel fairly heavily featuring me, so if I haven't bored you to death, please do come and join us over there as well. Either way, we'll see you again next time.